Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to the Fatal Brains, a place where poets gather to share their minds and thoughts. Of course, we are the earth and we are the people. Welcome to the third episode of Poets Speak of Poets. Peace and harmony, end to the war and hatred can only happen when we know each other. Fatal Brains endeavor to know people and philosophy, stories, and laws across the culture and the continents. Under this segment of Poets Speak of Poets, our world poets come together to talk of other legendary poets of the place of origin or the country or elsewhere. So the basic purpose of the program is to bring the world closer, erase all borders through literature. It's such a pleasure of having four guests who would be talking about their choice of poets. Along with me as a moderator, Dr. Rupali Sarkargaon, professor of Sri Venkateswara College, Delhi University, would also be moderating. In the last episode, we got to know about Marne Kilates, uh, who shared by Ma'am Josephine Gomez and Mr. David Leo Sirova talked about Rainer Maria Rilke and Miss Isabel Van Merlen talked about Emily Dickinson. Mr. Raul I. M. James talked about George Eliot Clark. In this episode, we had the honor of having Amy, Robert, Ray, and Laura, who would be talking about Octavio Paz, Walt Whitman, N.Scott Momaday, Robert Frost, in chronological order. So, without wasting much of your time, I would request our co-moderator, Dr. Rupali Sarkar, who is the mentor guide of this Fertile Brains, to begin the show and introduce Amy Hoskins as well. Thank you. Over to you.
Namaste, dear friends and poets. Welcome to this wonderful evening. Some great American poets we are going to hear about. I remember when I was in the university as a student doing my post-graduation, I studied American literature as one of my optional subjects. I'm very familiar with many of the poets that we're going to talk about today, but I have, in a period of time, put them to sleep somewhere. So I'm really waiting to listen to you all. And there is also the pleasure of knowing that this program is going to be broadcast to a lot of people who would like to know about the poets that know about you firstly, and also about the poets that you're going to talk about. And we begin with Amy Hoskins. Good evening, Amy, and welcome. You have I'm sure you have a bigger bio, but you've been very modest and there's something very small, so I read about it. Amy Hoskins is a poet and visual artist, creating with disabilities from our home studio in South Nashville. Amy has written a novel, 2 poetry chapbooks, and has had over 30 poems published. In 2024, Alien Buddha Press published poems since 2019, entitled The Semblance of Equal Grace. She'll be speaking about Octavio Paz. We have this great connection with him because he was ambassador to India. And, he has in his poetry written a great deal about his own country, but he was much in love with India. And he has written a short write-up on India too. And he was, his great love was India. And I think your choosing him brings the world closer. That's what we're trying to do. Thank you so much. Amy, we look forward to listening to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you both having me. It's a real honor. And I wanted to say a little more about Octavio Paz. I agree that he was transformed by his time in India for sure. It really affected him. He was born, let me post this in the chat. He was born in 1914 in Mexico. Let me post that there. And he was Mexican ambassador to India from 1962 to 1968. He resigned because of the Mexican government's massacre of students in Mexico City in 1968. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature for Labyrinth of Solitude in 1990, which he had written earlier, and then he passed in Mexico City in 1998. I'll be reading from the poems of Octavio Paz from 1931 to 1996, and it's a wonderful translation by Elliot Weinberger. There can be no society without poetry, but society can never be realized as poetry. It is never poetic. Sometimes the two terms seek to break apart. They cannot. And then I've got my link there as well. So let me get started. Let me move that so I can see you. Okay, here we go. I've got a few short ones and a few two-pagers. Garden for Juan Gil Albert. Clouds adrift, sleepwalking continents, nations with no substance, no weight, geographies drawn by the sun and erased by the wind. Four walls of adobe, bougainvillea, my eyes bathe in its peaceful flames. The wind moves through the leaves of exaltation and bended knees of grass. The heliotrope with purple steps crosses over, enveloped in its aroma. There is a prophet, the ash tree, and the contemplative, the pine. The garden is small, the sky immense. Lush survivor amid my rubble. In my eyes you see yourself, touch yourself, know yourself in me, and in me think of yourself. In me you last, and in me you vanish. Nocturnal water. The night with the trembling eyes of a horse. The night with eyes of water in the sleeping fields. Is in your eyes of a trembling horse, is in your eyes of secret water, eyes of shadow water, eyes of well water, eyes of dream water. Silence and solitude, like two small animals guided by the moon. Drink from those eyes, drink from those waters. If you open your eyes, night opens its doors of moss, opens a secret kingdom of water that flows from the center of night. If you close them, a river, a sweet and silent current, floods over you within, moves forward, darkens you. Night soaks the riverbanks in your soul. Concert in the garden. Vina y Mirdagam for Carmen Figueroa de Mayer. It rained. The hour is an enormous eye. Inside it, we come and go like reflections. The river of music enters my blood. If I say body, it answers wind. If I say earth, it answers where. The world, a double blossom opens. Sadness of having come, joy of being here. I walk lost in my own center. The face and the wind. Beneath an unrelenting sun, ochre plains, lion-colored hills. I struggle up a craggy slope of goats to a place of rubble, lopped columns, headless gods, surreptitious flashes of light, a snake or some small lizard, hidden in the rocks, the color of toxic ink, colonies of brittle beetles, a circular courtyard, a wall full of cracks, clutching the earth, blind knot, trees all roots, a peepo, the religious fig, rain of light, a gray hulk, the Buddha, its features a blurred mass. Ants climbed and descended the slopes of his face, still intact, the smile, that smile, a gulf of Pacific clarity, and I was, for a moment, diaphanous, a wind that stops, turns on itself, and is gone. The Green News for Roger Munier. Yeah. Born at the edge of a brick, in a corner of the patio, a tuft of grass, warrior, against air and light, though air and light itself. Clarity sharpened into valiant pins, the tenacious sap turned into transparency on diaphanous stalks, instantaneous emeralds. Dew sprout, you shoot from the rock like an exclamation. Just born, you're 1,000 years old and a minute. Each day the first day of the world. You're a little air and a drop of sun. You're a blink. You dance going nowhere, stillness swaying in the palm of the wind. Bundles of spears of glass and sparks, will of the earth turned into reflections. More light than grass and more than light, tangible breath untouched, the sudden body of the instant. Day opens its blossom, noon is immobilized. I write on a table, I stop. I hear the silence of the wood. I see the green glare. Time half opens. Breathing. Still bodiless, disheveled spring, invisible yet tangible. It leaps around the corner, hurries by, vanishes, touches my forehead, no one there. Spring air, nobody knows how it appears and disappears. The sun opens its eyes, the world has just turned 20. Light beats behind the blinds, sprouts shoot in my thoughts, air more than leaves, a flutter barely green. They turn for a moment and scatter. Time weighs a little less. I breathe. And this last one's called The Same. As morning begins in a deep-rooted world, everything is the same. The quiet flare of the rose that opens in the arms of air, and the quiet of the dove come from who knows where with white feathers and darting eyes. Face to face, far and near, the disheveled rose, the polished dove. The bodiless wind runs through the branches. Everything changes. Nothing remains. The rose has two wings and nests in the cornice, settling in the vertigo. Perfection unleaving, revived by its scent. The dove is flower and flame. The difference is now the same. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me share Octavio Paz with you.
Thank you so much, Amy. I love the way you rendered the poems. What a great writer and poet you have brought to us today. The complexity of his thoughts. And you know what is very interesting is that some of these great poets that we are going to today here were also people who were activists, people who were very deeply involved with the nation, with their state, with their people. And when they wrote for them. They didn't write their own answers, it was the answer of the people. And you brought that out so beautifully. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor. I look forward to everyone else.
Thank you, Annie. I mean, it's such a pleasure having you and uh, listening about Octavio Paz through your voice. Remarkable. Let me take the honor of inviting Laura Grevel, who would be talking about Walt Whitman. She's basically from Texas, lives in Europe. She's a poet and fiction writer. Her writings tackle the immigrant experience, politics, storytelling, and nature. Her poems and short stories have been published in podcasts, giants, and anthologies. Laura often reads at international poetry open mics online, and I believe in offline too. And we are very much excited of listening to you and talking about Walt Whitman. Laura, show is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here tonight and grateful for what you all do for peace and poetry. It's very important to me too. Um, I first encountered Walt Whitman, poet, in school when I was 15 years old or so in American literature. And he instantly spoke to me. I felt his words were very modern, although he was born in 1819 and he died in 1892. And I will share something in the chat after I finish. So I was in high school in, I don't know, 74, 5, 6, something in there. And so this is, you know, not quite 100 years after, but his piece that we were reading from, which is his most famous piece, is called Leaves of Grass. And this is a book. He self-published it in 1855, and he continued revising it and was still doing that at his death in 1892. So this work has made a huge influence on the U.S. And his influence is still strong today. He's known as America's poet, and the poet Ezra Pound said about him, he is America. And I'll read to you just a little bit of this excerpt of the preface to Leaves of Grass, which has a little drawing of him looking like a very ordinary person in a hat and a sort of button-down shirt, cotton shirt, and trousers, looking like a person who could have been a laborer. So this is part of the preface, and this is what we read. Part of this is what so influenced me. This is what you shall do. Love the earth and sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Re-examine all you have been told in school or church or in any book, and dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem. So this affected me very strongly. I'm still affected by it. I printed it out at one point and put it on one of my son's doors of his room because he was having some trouble. And I said, "Look, this has always spoken to me as putting it simply." And I think that's what Walt Whitman really succeeded in doing, and this is why is still so important in America. He attempted to reach out to the common person, um, and did. He speaks, in 1855, he speaks directly to you, and so he changed things. He's known as the father of free verse, although he did not invent free verse, but he mostly wrote in it. And and he was living in New York State, what is now New York State, most of his life, although he was, during the Civil War, he helped in a hospital with wounded soldiers, and he was helping people. And that was one of his themes too, was loss and healing. Um, his work incorporates both transcendentalism and realism. Now, realism is obviously, reality, what you're describing, something that's standing in front of you that we see. But transcendentalism is very interesting. It is a 19th century New England, that's Northeast USA, movement. And it brings together the idealistic system of thought, that is, they believed in the unity of all creation. They believed in the innate goodness of humanity and the supremacy of insight over logic and experience for the revelation of deepest truth. Now, this is where some of this is international. These ideas connect with transcendentalism in Germany at the time, or just before that. It connects with scriptures from India and China and the writings of various mystics. So the transcendentalism was, a coming together of international thinking, philosophies, religious thinkings, and yes, that I also thought was very interesting as a 15-year-old and on. I always I have loved his work and how he speaks for America. And while I say that, I'll just read you a little piece here. He has in his work one called "I Hear America Singing." I hear America singing, the varied carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be blithe and strong. The carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam. The mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work. The boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat. The deckhand singing on the steamboat deck. And he goes on to include shoemakers, woodcutters, the delicious singing of the mother or the young wife, the girl sewing, and the day, what belongs to the day. So it's very, what people, the common people, what everybody was doing, what people really did. And that too really impressed me. He believed there was a vital symbiotic relationship between poet and society. And that to me is also a very American concept, but not that other cultures couldn't have that too, but I think that really rings true in his work, that he wants to have a connection with his society and not be talking about things that, the common man would have no clue of what that is. Legends and myths of the Greeks or something. So then another thing that impressed me, he has a poem called Song of Myself. I celebrate myself, and sing myself. And what I assume, you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood, formed from this soil, this air, born here of parents born here, from parents the same and their parents the same. I now, 37 years old, in perfect health begin, hoping to cease not till death. So his again, this was I think a rather fresh and original take in 1855 perhaps, and this talks directly to us. And just to go to towards the end of Song of Myself, it encompasses a lot. So we get towards the last page. The spotted hawk swoops by and accuses me. He complains of my gab and my loitering. I too am not a bit tamed. I too am untranslatable. I sound my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world. The last scud of day holds back for me. It flings my likeness after the rest, and true as any on the shadowed wilds, it coaxes me to the vapor and the dusk. I depart as air. I shake my white locks at the runaway sun. I effuse my flesh in eddies and drift it in lacy jags. I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. So there again, he doesn't put himself up above other people. He says literally, then at one point, I will be the dirt under your feet. And so his approach is extremely, and his symbols were new, to have things like dirt, um, straw, debris, rotting leaves. So he had symbols in his work that were newer for poets to use. And another thing I haven't said yet is his work was very sensual. The Leaves of Grass was considered out of bounds. It was too sensual for 1855. And so a lot of people rejected that, and he was definitely, not instantly famous. So I wanted to say there was one poem called "I Sing the Body Electric," and I'll read just a little bit of that. I sing the body electric. The armies of those I love engirth me, and I engirth them. They will not let me off till I go with them, respond to them, and discorrupt them, and charge them full with the charge of the soul. Was it doubted that those who corrupt their own bodies conceal themselves? So this also struck me as a young person as being incredibly strong. I sing the body electric, and there are discussions to the current time of whether he was he was obviously aware of the sensuality of humans, which is true, absolutely true, and whether he was a homosexual or bisexual is not known for sure. But from the Leaves of Grass, people have discussed these sorts of things. What he was an incredibly talented poet, and able to talk to everyone. Just to say yes, his idiosyncratic treatment of the body and the soul, the self and the other, is different, I think, and original for that time. And another thing that's important is he embraced all religions equally, but at the same time, he was a religious skeptic. So he was not a person who followed, sort of the formal earth-bound, written by man types of things. But he believed God was immanent, transcendent, and the human soul was immortal. And he believed that the things we see, the trees, the meadows, the mountains, were all part of God. He had a sort of a pantheistic view. So that is what I will leave you with there. And I will just say that Robert told me something about Whitman, so I want to invite him to say something from a class workshop he took on Whitman. Thank you.
Thank you. Walt Whitman's burial site is in the United States, in the state of New York on Long Island. There is a facility there which is a tribute to him. There's also an American publisher called Local Gems, which is publishing maybe every 5 years a tribute anthology to Walt Whitman. And about 5 years ago, there was a celebration of Walt Whitman's birthday at this facility on Long Island, where about 50 poets together read all of Leaves of Grass in about 2 hours. So thank you for inviting me to share what is being attributed to Walt Whitman now.
Thank you, Laura. It was a wonderful presentation on Walt Whitman. He's truly, he is a man of the people, poet of the people. And he said that poets must write about the people around them. When I was a student, and we had to take part in a declamation contest, where we just recite a poem, I would always choose "O Captain, my Captain, the fearful trip is done." And it has so much of power and so much of sorrow in that poem. And there's another poem of his that I like very much is, I know I can turn and live with animals, that really tell you about how peacefully animals live and how horrible we human beings are in contrast to animals. So the Song of Myself, the Leaves of Grass, the poems that you have read, they have brought back to us this great poet this evening. And I think Prasanna is mighty pleased because this is his program, an initiative to listen to the great poets, and you've done a great job for us, Laura. We go back. What happens is that now that you reintroduced him to us, we go back and read him again and again. And that's what the difference will be now for us in our lives. Thank you so much. Now and you yourself are a poet activist. I know that you are concerned about the world that is going on around us, and therefore Walt Whitman fits in with what you have to say. Now we have Ray Whitaker, and of course we're very familiar. And one of my earliest memories is one of your poems, if I'm not wrong, Ray, where you talked about an Indian driver who was ready to die for the country, was waiting for a railway train. Do you remember the poem? Did you write that? I think I remember that you read this on Prasanna's program, The Fertile Ray. Ray was a delegate to the 2024 Writers International Panorama Festival this past January. He participates regularly several Zoom poetic events worldwide. Among them, he has been spotlighted on a US national poetry broadcast from Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio in April 24, and also an international poetry recital hosted by the Fertile Minds out of India, Fertile Brains, this past April. In July, he was a leading featured poet in David Leo Siroy's Spoken Word Online, In August upcoming will one of the 6 poets featured at the, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Chautauqua Arts Festival in Palmer Lake, Colorado. He is moderator for Michael Lewis Johnson's social media page, My Voice, Your Words, Poetry in Action, and an editor on Cures Masticadores, Canada. Ray has 4 books published and 2 chapbooks. His work has been published in 12 different countries. He lives in Colorado Springs, Colorado, USA. So welcome, Ray, and we will now hear about Robert Frost. Is it what you're reading about?
Good morning.
N.Scott Momaday. N.Scott
Good morning.
Momaday.
I have, I don't think I've ever heard anybody read my bio out loud, so I'm like, oh, okay. So, I have one of my poet heroes to talk about this morning. But before I do that, I want to say how privileged I feel to be here amongst everyone here, and really grateful for the opportunity. One of my poet heroes. I have 4 of them. But we'll talk about N.Scott Momaday today. N.Scott Momaday was a Native American. I'm going to go ahead and put this information about him in the chat so that you can be reading it. Maybe. Anyway, he took the art of storytelling to a different level, and part of the reason that he's took this art of storytelling to a different level was that he was able to draw on the experience of Native American storytelling. Now, if you, for those of you that don't know about Native Americans, there was very little written language. There was petroglyphs, and the Cherokee had a written language with alphabet, but he was a Kiowa, and of the Plains Indians. They like to be referred to as Native Americans or First Nations now. And so the art of storytelling was embellished, was an art form and an educational tool for the Native Americans. And youth and young adults alike were told stories to pass along the wisdom of the tribes. So Scott Momaday took that to a different level because he took the essence and the being of storytelling in the nature of the Native Americans into poetry, into prose poetry, into story, short stories, all written down, right? So this was really remarkable, and he is the very first Native American to receive a Pulitzer Prize in 1969 for his book House Made of Dawn. And from there, he opened the door for many other Native American writers and poets to gain acceptance and be published nationally and internationally. And I can think of 3 or maybe 4 other Native American poets who are now poet laureates, who have been poet laureates of their state or municipality, of their communities, well-respected individuals as they should be. I'm trying to put this whole thing in the chat, and it's not going for some reason. I don't know why. Oh, it's telling me that I put too many words in. Let's put that out and see what happens. I'll have to do that afterward. So, going on. There are some poems that I'm going to read to you today, and I'm going to start off with one from the book Dream Drawings. Love the subtitle. Configurations of a Timeless Kind. Love that. And this is a piece I'm going to read to you, and then we'll talk a little about it. and it's called The Realization of Nothing. At Brooklandi, I joined a group of sightseers at Merlin's tomb. Their guide was a portly man of average aspect who looked to be in his 50s or 60s. His eyebrows and beard were white, and there was an air of authority about him. He proclaimed himself a druid, and he spoke of Merlin with great authority. He held easily and securely the attention of his audience. There was something unusual about him. I felt that he existed in a separate age, a dimension of experience quite apart from my own. When he finished his remarks, I approached him, told him I had never met a druid, asked him if I might take his picture. He very kindly agreed. But when I held the camera to my eye, I could not find him in the viewfinder. Nevertheless, I snapped the picture. Later, when I had the film developed, that was the only exposure in which there was no image at all. There was the realization of nothing. Lovely work. And this is very typical of the work that he writes. He takes you down a road using imagery and using nature and using discourse, that's storytelling part, and then ends it with something that is what Billy calls a poetic turn, and usually just lovely work that has engaged me for years. I love the way he introduces mystery to his writing. There, in most, unless you are a Native American, most of us do not have a clan that we draw from. We do not have many thousands of years of tradition that we walk in our daily lives. And to me, that's something that's missing in my life, that I have taken something from Dr. Momaday. I refer to him in my thoughts as Dr. Momaday. He earned a PhD. He was an amazing writer and educator. But I've taken some of that business of sourcing the Native American traditions of walking in the footsteps of the elders into my own life, and tried to manage that in most of my daily experiences. His Kiowa heritage shows in all his work. He is fond of saying that the Kiowa were very good at feeling people as well as horses. And they were very devoted to their horses and very devoted to their tribe, and treated captured people after a war or a battle very kindly. So he carries this into in his writing. I'm going to read another piece to you. Let's see. This one is called Trees of Evening Sky. It is from the book In the Presence of the Sun, another remarkable book. Trees and Evening Sky. He saw the black trees leaning. In different ways, their limbs tangled with the mottled clouds. The clouds rolling on themselves, a wide belt of 4 colors, yellow, orange, red, and black, and stars in the tangled limbs. It's short, it's powerful, the imagery is precisely engaging. You can't help but see that evening cloud, that evening sky. Very, very strong stuff. And one of the earliest poetic influences I had was of the opinion that shorter is better, which kind of flies in the face of Walt Whitman's work because he has a 26-page piece in Leaves of Grass. So, I mean, it's amazing. I might be wrong about the 26 pages, but it's long, And but I try to incorporate some of that in my writing, and I find that I fail miserably at that because I write stuff that's longer, but at the same time, it's something I try to push into. It's an influence on me. As an educator, he was also quite the entertainer when he spoke to the public in educational venues. The audience generally was enthralled by him because his storytelling ways, his ways of speaking, his ways of requiring remembering of what he had just said in the audience was just tremendous, just tremendous. I have another poem that I want to read to you. I'd only picked 3 of his for today, and I'm using bookmarks and books to... All right, this next one is from Dream Drawings, and it's called The Poet's Muse. Now, I've read this poem a dozen times, and I get something different out of it about every time, so hopefully you all will appreciate it as much as I do. She came to him as an apparition, a figure in a dream. He did not know what she was at first, and he tried to name her, so to give her an acceptable definition. But nothing he could think of caught her essence. And she was indeed essential. He was perplexed. What was she that she could not be seen or touched, revealed to his senses? She seemed to consist in an air or mist or silence. There were times when she seemed to not be at all, yet he knew of her being. She existed in some dimension apart from reality. She existed in some dimension apart. She was perhaps an extension of his imagination. He thought that he might have invented her, but no, she was beyond his influence. But he was not beyond hers. In her means and vibrancy, she gave him inspiration. She enabled him to write well, to imagine himself as he imagined her, in words that were informed with perception, precision, and truth. She enabled him to accomplish his potential. Then one day, on a street named Calais Saint-November, she appeared before him in her corporal guise. It was as if he had expected her for many years. And on the surface of his mind he wrote, "Thank you." I have a muse myself, and I think of her as a green-haired woman, but I don't, until I reread it again, I just never really could put that influence of having someone who was sitting there directing what came out of the pen. I don't think I could have ever written anything quite as good as what he wrote about the influence of the muse. I am going to leave you with this, that I would encourage all of you to invest in one of 16 books that he was able to write and put out. And I will also tell you that I have taken to my heart his ways of storytelling, to my thoughts his ways of pushing cultures into a sense of place and have into my sense of myself a real grasp of my own clan and my way of being. Thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate the opportunity to be amongst such an esteemed group. Thank you so much.
How beautifully you have expressed way about Momaday. You raised a curiosity to read out and beautiful analysis, the picture that you presented. Rupari ma'am, would you like to say something?
Yes, I'm absolutely mesmerized by your presentation of Dr. Momaday's poetry. And we have tribal people in our country too, and they have oral, traditions, and they go back to a long time, and they're treated in the same way. And the stereotyping of the tribal person, like you have Dr. Mamadi said, I don't know that poem that you read at in the beginning where there is no image. This erasure, this of not seeing, of people being there and yet not seeing that they're invisible. In Washington, D.C., there's a museum on the Native American people. When you see the kind of suffering, and in Canada, they call them the First Nation, and I can understand how you must, I was very moved. I'm very moved when the same thing, we're out of culture, nothing to go back to. And you read about them and the things they write about, there is a lot of suffering and pain inside. And you have brought that out so beautifully today. I have not read him before, but I read that he belongs to the Kiowa tribe, and he was highly educated. Now, there's so many, I noticed, for example, when I traveled in the United States, especially in Washington, D.C., where there's a lot of food outlets, there'll be Puerto Rican food and, Indian food and so on. But I could never find a restaurant which had Native American food. But I did get it in the museum. So, somehow they push them into museums. There are people who are pushed into museums. They made it to statues. We have that kind of thing happening too. So I love, there's a protest in his poetry. There's a tremendous protest where he stands up for his people. And Ray, you've done such a great job of it. I mean, I can only say thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for saying
great.
those things. I would guess that the Native American foods that you are missing, you'll probably find in the Southwest, where many of the Indian Native American reservations exist now. But first reading his work inspired me to look into my own clan, and there's a lot of controversy in my own clan as well. But I was born and raised in the United States Air Force. I'm an Air Force brat, and
Okay.
I call myself a member of the Warrior Clan because of that, even though I have never worn
Yeah.
the
Okay. I'm an army brat.
Yeah, and it's funny because I wore the uniform of a healthcare provider. I worked in a hospital for 34 years, but I was more concerned with undoing the damages people did to themselves than doing damage to people. So, but to look into the clan was just profound out of dream drawings for me, and even more so with the presence of the sun. It just had me really dwell on it, and I'm sure that's shown up in some of my writing. So, but anyway, thank you for the opportunity and the commentary.
Thank you so much, Ray. Really moved.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Rupari ma'am. Thank you, guys. Really very much enlightening when I get to hear these words from. It's a kind of beautiful analysis. Let us go across to our next panel member who will be talking about Robert Frost, and he's none other than Robert Fleming, as a visual poet from Lewis D. Delaware. is founding contributing editor of Old Scratch Press. Old Scratch Press, a poetry short form collective established in 2023, and a contributing editor to the digital magazine Instant Noodles, an indie lit magazine for discerning readers. Instant Noodles litmag.com. His books are White Noir and White Noir Fleming. There is quote, and he's an award-winning writer and artist. Wins to 2022 San Gabriel Valley, California Broadside, 2021 Best of Mad Swirl Poetry, nominations 2023 Blood Rag Poet, Delaware Press Poem, third place, and two honorable mentions, and one honorable mention for graphic design, and two pushcart, and two best of net. That was Robert Fleming who will be talking about Robert Frost. Over to you, Robert. Thanks for
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. The reason why I chose Robert Frost is because my voice as a poet is a combination of Robert Frost and Dr. Seuss. What I most admired about Robert Frost is his ability to take the reader directly to the place that he is writing about, whether he's writing about the forest or the farm. When I read his poems, I feel like I'm there with him. And that is something I always try to do myself as a writer, which is to bring the reader to the now. I'm going to share a little bit about Robert Frost. This is a little bit about his biography. He was born in 1874 and passed in 1963. He was an American poet. His work was first published in England before it was published in America, and he became a very famous literary figure in the United States. He was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 1960 from the United States for his poetry work. This is one of his photographs of himself when he was more of a senior man. His nickname is the Intellectual Gardener. What I like about this photo is that it is one of the places that he writes about, which is the farm. So you can see in the background, there is a farm building. So I like that. And then this is another picture of himself as a much younger man. And what I like about this picture is when I was a child in elementary school, the desk that Frost is at is very similar to the desk which I had when I was a child in school, where I learned to read and write. Now I'm going to read the poem by Frost, whose theme has been the most influential on me. It's called Mending Wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground swell under it, and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and make gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair, where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding, to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring, mending time, we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go, to each the boulders that have fallen to each, and some are loaves and some so nearly balls. We have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game. One on a side, it comes to little more. There, where it is, we do not need the wall. Here is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get cross and eat the cones under his pines. I tell him, he only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is in the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there, bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top, in each hand, like the old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, good fences make good neighbors. And the two things which I like the most about this poem is the idea of how neighbors can get along and not end up in disputes. And Frost is suggesting that the wall is very helpful for having the boundary where neighbors will get along, with his line, good fences make good neighbors. The other thing I like is that Frost wrote a poem which is more than one page. Myself, as a poet, I have a fear that if I write a poem which is more than 30 lines, that the reader will not turn the page. So I really admire Frost's courage being able to do a poem which is 2 pages. Now I will share 2 poems which I wrote, which were inspired by this poem, Mending Wall. It's called To Fence or Not to Fence. I'm on the left side now. Fences aren't enough when a weeping willow weeps over, a border collie digs under, a 7-year-old boy shortcuts, a wind eye blows a trampoline. Fences are too much when you need a cup of sugar. Your bull lost its thrust. Your child meets the boy next door. You have 3 a.m. heart attack. So I'm very inspired by doing a poem with a farm scene. One other element that I use as a writer is duality. I've also added the suggestion that that it may be a mistake to build that wall between your neighbor, because there could come a time when your neighbor needs you or you need your neighbor. I'll share one more poem inspired by Mending Wall. It's about a different type of neighbor. Invisible and visible neighbors. The lonely are lovely. The lovely are lonely. Humans are lonely, covered with 39 trillion microbes, on Earth with 7.8 billion humans. With their maker, humans are lovely. The lovely are lonely. The lonely are lovely. And I'll share one more Frost poem. Here it is. It is stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, that darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound, the sleep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. What I really like about this poem is what Laura was sharing about Walt Whitman, his choice for having simple language so there could be great access for people of all different backgrounds to be able to appreciate this poem. And the other thing which I like about this poem is that it can be read on multiple levels, on a very simple level or on another level where a person is thinking that what the choices they're making for their entire life. Again, I will share one or two poems which was inspired by this poem. This is called Not Stopping by Roadkill on Route 66. Route 66, I've driven 1,000 times. The sports bar at exit 289. You will not see me break here to claim this creature is alive. I fear my car's heater is not heating to stop at the roadside for a pee without a car repair shop near. I will pass these meals to my rear. A roadkill must be eaten in 48 hours. Any more stomach sickness follows. Roadkill death time detector in my trunk. Butchering I flunked. My headlights no show a deer. Get sugar doving this deer to my dear. Red and blue lights circling in my rear. Miles to be chased before I gulp more beer. And I will share one more visual poem. This is called Deer Disturbance. It's not hit and run to hit a deer. Removing a road fawn is a taking. Removing a reindeer is dinner. Deers have run-in hits too. A doe on a dashboard is a rain sacrifice. A buck charging over a car roof is reclaiming a field. A man half through a windshield is a rut. Thank you. And I invite you, when you are at home in an urban setting, when you need to travel somewhere else, like the forest or the woods or the farm, to get a Robert Frost poem, and he will take you there.
What do I say to this wonderful presentation? Your voice, my God. I wish I had a voice like yours. That beautiful voice in which you can read poetry of this time. Robert Frost is known to many Indians because our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, when he died, they found on his desk a piece of paper on which these lines were written. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, and I have miles to go before I sleep and miles to go before I sleep. So we read that, as we grew up, and it's written about whenever we read anything about Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, these lines are written there. As a teacher of literature, of course, I taught Robert Frost, and this poem "Mending Walls," this has really influenced me a lot. And the university campus where I was teaching in Delhi University, the other side there was a shanty town. There was a little bit of a shanty town, and there were these very poor children who lived there. And then on the campus, there were all these, big cars and students coming, and they were also wealthy or, enjoying life. And so I created a project called Good. What is this thing? Walls do not. What are the last lines? Do not make good neighbors. I said yes. We do not make good neighbors. And extending education to the neighborhood. And so I wrote a paper, and when I was young, I always wanted to go to Cambridge University, but of course my parents couldn't afford to send me, and I didn't have the grades to go there. And then wrote this paper, and which says that extending education to the neighborhood, and good walls do not make good neighbors. And it was very much appreciated there. So how I can see in your poetry, of course, Robert talking about Robert, and of course Ray Whitaker also, and Walt Whitman, and we heard what Octavio Paz, that you people have been influenced by this poet, and they created his written poetry so much like them. I mean, I hope that someday somebody would be influenced by the kind of poetry that we write, and some young person would write something like that. Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful presentation, all of you. What can we say? It's very overwhelming, Prasanna.
Very overwhelming,
Yeah.
ma'am. Very overwhelming. One gets influenced by the poet, and he internalize in his
And
style.
and the way you people have read your poems, and the poets who have spoken to us have spoken in a voice as if they're talking to us, just like that. It's not just high poetry of words that we cannot understand, going out to the people. They were poets of the people, and I think I'm a poet like that. I really believe that we should write about the people. You cannot ignore that. You cannot live in an ivory
On
tower. In an
on
ivory
that
tower.
note, Ray has this poem influenced by N.Scott Momaday, and he would like to read that poem. I also like to thank the viewers who are constantly with us by they're commenting and they're listening, and Rupa Rao, Nivedita Roy, and Shalini Nand and Shyama Prasad Patnaik, and Don Krieger, Mick Meza, Giulio Magarini, Shalom Literary, Elevate, and Akhil Popley. Thank you for, continuous watch and listening, and be, giving us your comments in the section. Ray, over to you. Unmute your mic, please.
Yeah, that's an important part, unmuting the mic. This is a piece directly influenced by Dr. Momaday's movement from his clan, and it's about my clan. It's called The Stories from the Before. There are a great many warriors, and the tales about them are about the steel, the shiny metal dragons flying, separating. Let's see here. Let me start up. For some reason, I'm having trouble with my computer. Yeah, okay. The shiny metal dragons flying, separating the wood, gray metal whales cleaving the sea, those steel rhinos dissevering the enemy. There are a great many renditions about the brave who, once having been fearful, became fearless, facing enemies with found courage. My father was one of them. He flew steel dragons dropping from the sky inside God's bubble, making the ground shake, and those on it afraid of the fire from the sky. 3 great conflicts did he fly the steel dragons, girdling his loincloth to be ready for the fight, carrying the fire to his enemies. There are many accounts of dropping out of the clouds, silently falling earthwards, bringing terror to those bound to the ground. The hordes of Mongols dissolved. I have his blood in me, being of the warrior clan. Courage flows in my arteries. Resilience courses in my veins because of that. It is a joy to know this part of me. Because of that, I can look the bear in the eye. If I should die from that, it will be a good death. I will join the others from the before swiftly when that occurs. The shared blood draws it nigh. My father waits for me there. We will see each other again and tell our stories of the earth. Thank you very much.
How beautiful. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Obviously, good fences do not make good neighbors. And this program has brought us all together. We've broken all the walls. And Laura, tell us about Laura, the kind of poetry you write, the kind of activism that you speak of. You know, I can see that you write. You have a lot to say about the kind of things that are happening in war zones to children and to people. How have these poems influenced you? How have the writers that you read influenced your poetry?
I'm sorry, who are you asking?
Laura.
Sorry. Well, they've influenced me a lot. I do write some longer works, which Walt Whitman was not always the most concise, as Robert has pointed out about Frost. And I do write about people, normal people. I have a piece, although in fact called "To My Neighbor Who Built a Wall Against Me." So that's I mean, the sentiments were, with Walt Whitman, that people are all the same. We're part of one another. And at the same time, I think Frost was saying, kind of making fun of the neighbor who needed to have this wall, and it had to be something. But what were they walling in or out? So my pieces. Yes, they speak to I think he wanted, peace between people, and he also admired the one thing he believed the poet and the universe were the lover and the beloved. And I have had a great deal of optimism in my life, which has sometimes been crushed as I've grown older. But I really believe that humanity is good, and that there is goodness in humanity. So I have written that in a number of pieces of my poetry and my short stories, where, as one person read some of my stories, and they said, "You believe that life is good, that there is good here." And yeah, so definitely has the work of Walt Whitman has influenced me.
Thank you, Laura.
It's very evident. It's very evident, when you have presented it in this a more elaborate way and a kind of deep analysis. It's not a thing unless you get influence, unless you get into it. poems hot. It's not an ordinary thing. So thank you, Laura. That was remarkable. And Robert, thank you for your presentation on Robert Frost. The voice, like Rupali ma'am said, that's very empowering. And that kind of voice, very, very. I have no words. You talked about N.Scott, Momaday, and the perspective of, kind of migrants or whatever, the kind of days. And talk about Octavio Paz, Hoskins. Remarkable. Thank you for this opportunity of expressing my joy towards you for presenting and coming to, and thank you to all the viewers who watched us, who are there with us with their comments. And I would love to ask viewers to stay tuned for the next episode of Poets Speak of Poets, fourth episode, which is new set of panel members who will be talking about the choice of poets. Thank you, my dear friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.